Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this Thursday evening at the museum. I want to tell you what's happening 2 weeks from tonight, which will be August 4. Fred Malone, some of you may know him from the Marion County Historical Society, and I think he's also involved in at the Mohawk Historical Society. Anyway, what he does in his spare time, one of the many things he does, is he impersonates different historical figures, and I think a lot of us here have seen him portray President Polk, I think Governor Cox, of former, the late Governor Cox of Ohio. So he is going to do Colonel Edmund Starling, who was a Secret Service agent, I cannot say that, but for 5 different presidents, and I think it was starting with Hoover. Anyway, so hopefully he'll spill some secrets about what happened at the White House. But knowing Fred, he'll do a really good job.
All right, well that's coming up in a couple of weeks. This weekend we have a pretty exciting program going on, if you haven't heard about it. The Overland Inn, Sarah Fisher, the curator up there, has been working on a quilt show, and we'll have probably almost 24 historic quilts, some from the Society and several that are actually on loan from Brian Long. Some of you know Brian and know the kind of material he collects. You know, he's got some incredibly beautiful quilts that'll be on display. So we invite you all up there. It's Saturday and Sunday from 1 until 5. Now, the other thing we've got coming up is our annual gun raffle. I will turn it over to our other co-president, Woody, to talk about the gun raffle, and I'll be the Vanna with the flyer.
Yeah, I'm excited this year. We decided not to just raffle guns. We also have a $1,000 gift certificate to A&A Grocery. So you have a choice. You can buy at Wyandot Firearms. We got ourselves a nice 45 ACP Kimber, $1,000 gun. This is a beautiful gun. The first person picked gets their choice of either or. The second person picked gets the remaining prize. But I mean, both of these prizes are tremendous prizes. We draw Veterans Day in November.
Right.
Tickets are right here during our Veterans Day services. And I'll tell you what, it's just contact me or any of the board members for your tickets. Are $20 a piece. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited this year. So everyone, just kind of jump on the bandwagon and help us out. Thank you.
All right, well, the reason we're all here tonight is to learn a little bit about the history of baseball. It's kind of interesting because I have done kind of the early history of football as I researched a lot of Hardin County and Wyandot County football, but we're lucky to have one of our board members, Dave Fadley, who a lot of you know is a local historian, reenactor, has been with the board for quite a while, both on the board, off the board, on the board. So tonight he's going to talk about the early years of baseball, and there were a lot of things. As many years as I've been in the museum field, there were some actual terms that he was talking about that I was not familiar with, so I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say. Dave, thank you.
Thank you. I got 2 disclaimers. Number one, my voice. I don't know how long it's going to last. It's been having its problems lately. And the other one is my eyes. I'm getting ready for cataract surgery here in a little over a week. So they haven't been the best. Now all of you look fuzzy, so that's good. Where I'm up here on my cards, I'm good. If you can't hear me, raise your hand or something. I don't know what, something. So without any more of that, move on. Oops, hit the wrong button. No. Wrong. Okay. I don't know what I did. Well, this little not a poem, but this came out of one of McGuffey's early readers. The boys play with balls, John has a bat in his hand. I can hit the ball. That was in 1844. So baseball goes back a long ways. Now, you look at that picture, it's kind of weird looking, and I'm not sure how accurate it really was, but it looked good on the poem. But the earliest baseball pictures that we have is this one. If you can see the date, I don't imagine you can totally. Right here, 1301. Now that's a bat and ball game. To call it baseball is not correct. I don't know what they called it. But they did have bats and balls. That bat looks to be a flat bat, a short one as you can tell, not as long as ours are.
Can you hold the microphone just a little bit closer?
Oh yeah, I'm terrible with microphones, I'll be honest. All right, so that's one of the early pictures of ball and bat games. There were lots of different ones. There were a lot of references to ball and bat games in a book that I've got down here called Baseball Before We Knew It. And it talks about the history of baseball way back when it wasn't called baseball, wasn't called much of anything. Many of the early references to ball and bat games, as they refer to them a lot, are fanciful. Like one person even suggested that Adam took an apple and threw it up in the air and played catch with it, since he didn't have Eve yet, so I don't know. And another one said in Isaiah, and I looked through Isaiah, I didn't read it verbatim, but in Isaiah somewhere there's a reference that sounds like it could be ball. And even cavemen are referenced as possibly having played it. Who knows? We don't know. The Navajo Indians and other tribes played ball, but they were very physical. And they, if you ever were down at the park several years ago when the Historical Society did an Indian weekend, we played lacrosse more or less. And boy, it got kind of physical. You could beat on each other pretty good. And they did. There were a lot of different games. I'm just going to name them. I'm not going to go over all these. My guy should be here forever. There was one game called Hand In, Hand Out. Another one, Moonshits. That's the way it's pronounced, I think. Tut Ball, Town Ball. And then they had 4 different kinds of cat ball, called a cat 1, 2, 3, and 4. And each one had various rules, numbers of players, bases as such. Square and feeder were 2 other games. Thique was from France, and Town Ball. Town Ball probably is one that we're a little bit familiar with, and they played that on town meeting days in the colonies. That's how it got to be called Town Ball. But they had, like I say, they had different number of players and bases and rules and bats, so it was kind of varied in that respect. And they came from a lot of countries. And some of the countries that this book referenced are England, France, Germany, from the Norse lands, Poland, Dutch, Afghanistan, India, North Africa, the Middle East, and Hawaii. And of course, that simply means that there were lots of games played by people all over the world. Some of them used balls or bats or clubs or whatever. So that's one thing that I was surprised how many different ones. One of the games, and this is the one that Ron talked about. Well, here's another little poem. I can get up here so I can read it. This is the first, whoops, come on back here. See, I'm not good with this. That's the wrong button. This is the first time that the word baseball was actually used, and that was in 1744. And this was part of the little poem. The lad, the ball over, break off away from the big, low, the next declined post, and oh boy, and then came home with joy. This was a game in which they had posts rather than bases. You had to run around and touch the posts. And again, there were various rules that went along with those as far as how many posts and what you had to do and how you got the person out and such. So it got to be kind of interesting. One of the ones Ron was talking about was a game called Trap Ball. And this is one. In this one, the batter up there has a little device down here called a trap. The ball was placed on top of that, and it didn't ever say how, but I think he probably stepped on something and the ball popped up, and then he hit it kind of T-ball without the ball moving. And that was trap ball. So they all had this. This was another one. And again, looks like somebody's going to get hurt there when he swings, but a lot of the pictures are somewhat distorted, I think. But anyhow, track ball, and the catapult flipped the ball up, and sometimes it was a stick, a short stick, about so long. He had to hit that, and then they had to, he was out, he hit that with a flat bat. Now my version of a flat bat, some of you were laughing at, the paddle I used to use in school.
I use that.
It's got my name on the other side of the head, made it for me. So anyhow, but they use a flat type paddle, as you can see there. That's, whoops, that's not the right button. Too much equipment here. So that's kind of a flat club like that. Like Ron said, kind of reminds you of lacrosse or something. But they just use so many different things that it's hard to remember. You could get out in that game by a fly ball that was caught, like today. They did have a boundary, so if you hit it out of bounds, you could get out that way. If someone threw the ball, one of the fielders threw the ball and hit the trap, or it landed within so close of the trap, the runner was out. And so then when he was out, if Woody got me out, we switched places. Woody came in to bat and I went out in his place. So that was an incentive to do well that way. And Stool Balls, another one, which is somewhat like that. It reminds me in a way more of like cricket. Except the batter had to hit this pitch with a bare hand. So it wasn't thrown hard, it was just leisurely pitched in there. They hit it that way, and then they had to run a course around and come back to home, and then they scored a point. And again, they could get out by the fielder hitting the stool, they called it. It was like that's why it reminds me of cricket in a way, the wicket. And if they hit that, that'd get you out. They could catch a ball on the fly or on the first hop. And any of you that know anything about the baseball, old-time baseball, we can catch the ball on the first hop sometimes. Depends a little bit on the team we're playing. But that was outlawed years later. They thought it wasn't manly enough to catch the ball on the bounce. Sure saves the hands, I'll tell you that. So that's kind of a little quick history of the games before baseball itself kind of got started.
Did you say about when they started?
Well, like I say, the first picture was 1301, was a picture of some kind of ball in that game. Now baseball, as we recognize it, it didn't start until clear up in the 1800s. Well, late 1700s actually. And that's where we're going from here a little bit. Early baseball games.
Dave?
Yeah.
Dave, I think it would be remiss not to mention that there's one school of biblical scholars that holds that the entire Bible is in fact about baseball. They would refer you to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the big inning.
Yeah, there's a few. Well, they go along with the guys who thought Adam played ball with an apple too. So, but you're right. There are lots of ideas. The book that I've got up here is full of ideas. Some of them fanciful, and some of them believable, and some of them not. So, I I showed you the picture of 1744, and that was the first use of the word baseball. And that was in a little book called the Little Pretty Pocket Book. And so that was the first time they used the word baseball. In 1764 and 1771, by this time baseball was starting to be played around at Yale. And then William Bradford, who was one of the early founders of our country, or of the colonies, they prohibited the ball players from playing in certain areas because they would hit windows and break them. So they were kind of chased off to another field. And if they did break windows, it cost them 6 pence. I don't know how much that was back then, but probably was enough. And they also had to pay for damages to fix the window. And that was interesting to me, that they were worried about breaking windows already. I mean, I thought that was when we played, right guys? Enough of you guys played ball back here. You probably broke a window or two. I won't ask. So, in the 1770s and 1780s, there were a lot of reports of soldiers playing ball. Now, being a Civil War reenactor as I am, I know that it's always said that baseball was spread because of the Civil War. But that actually started back in the colonial era during the American Revolution. And British soldiers, as well as Valley Forge, when Washington was there, they, when they could, played a little ball. And there was even an occasion where a young teenager named Sam Drewis sold balls to British POWs for a quarter apiece. And he said he couldn't make them fast enough. And he just took old stockings and made them into a ball and wound yarn around that. And then he would go down to the guy that did all the leather work and get white leather and cover them. And I've got a ball up here that I have two of them actually, but the bigger of the two is a leather bound ball. It's called an orange peel ball because if you were to peel an orange, that's kind of the way the ball is made. You can come up and look at it afterwards. And I also have a cloth ball that a friend of mine got me when he was on vacation, and it's just cloth. I mean, you wouldn't want to hit it with a bat too many times. You'd break the seams and it'd be gone. Kids could play with this in the house, or little kids could try to hit it and they weren't going to hurt it too much. The other ball, some of you probably have seen one of these in your grandmother's house. It's a string ball, and it's got a little, you can see it has brown strings that hold the whole thing together. It's pretty hard, but again, if you hit it too many times with a bat, I'm sure it would come to pieces. The bats I have up here, I showed you the paddle. Some of them are like that. This particular one has an acorn on the end of it. Now, I don't know what the significance of that might have been. It could have been, during the Civil War, it could have been an Army Corps badge. My great-great-grandfather was in the 10th Indiana, and they were in the 14th Corps, and an acorn was their symbol that they used to identify them. This bat's just an old wooden thing. It's kind of falling apart. Probably was that way in the beginning almost.
What wood was used to make the bats?
I have no idea. I would guess something hard. You know, oak. Wouldn't be surprised, ash. Whatever they had if they needed to. This one's got a double grip on it. Just a novelty of sorts. Some guys use those. I forget which one of the pro players had a split grip. Now, he didn't have the second ring around it, but he had a split grip. It was Williams or somebody, one of the good hitters. And I've seen guys hit that pretty well too. So those are some of the different things. You can come up and look at all this stuff afterwards. In 1796, Johann Gutsmuth from Germany set down a bunch of rules, and they were pretty detailed. Like, you could catch a ball on the fly, you could tag or hit the player. Massachusetts used to have a game, and they would plug the player, they called it, and that's how you got them out, or that's one way you could get them out, was to hit them with the ball. And he also could could use and throw the ball to the base, tag them out there like we do today. So that was 1796, long time ago. And he used a short flat bat in the game he was describing too. So there's just so much stuff in it, and the more I read the book with my eyes not cooperating very well, the worse it got. I got to the point where I could barely read. So now we'll go into the more modern type. I'm just going to throw out some dates to you and some information. If you got any questions, yell. 1823, there's a record that New York City had some ball clubs that played one another. But in 1845 is considered sort of the beginning of modern baseball. Alexander Cartwright of the Knickerbockers Baseball Club in New York set down a list of rules. The first time anybody tried to put together rules that everybody should play by. Like, you had to pitch underhand, foul ball was established. They didn't used to have foul balls. You could hit the ball anywhere, and they had to field it, so it gave the batter a big advantage. 3 strikes, they established that. In some games you only got 1 strike, some you got 4. Out on a fly ball or a 1 bounce, but the 1 bounce rule pretty much died out by 1865. Like I said, they didn't think it was manly enough to catch the ball on the bounce. It sure saves the fingers. Believe me, I got one here that's kind of crooked. I tried to catch that in the air. You may be tagged out, but you couldn't be hit with the ball and got out. We had a lot of fun with that, wouldn't we, Phil? We could have thrown and hit them. Anyhow, if an offensive player interfered with a defensive player, you know, you got in front of him so he couldn't field the ball, he was out. That was one of the rules, which I thought was kind of interesting, and I know you get out now. They also set up 3 outs per inning. Up to that time, sometimes it was how many runs you scored. They'd play up to 20. Sometimes they'd play 2 innings. Just all sorts of different rules. That's why I say they're just hundreds and hundreds of different games and different rules. And you had to bat in order. So you couldn't put the weak guy at the end and keep him there. The umpire's decision is final. I'm not sure that's always the case, but that's what they said in 1845. You couldn't score on a foul ball, and if the ball went out of play, you could go 1 base, which is 1 base on an overthrow. We played that since we were little kids. And somebody in here knew the answer to the next question. The first professional baseball team. Red Legs. And that was in 1869. They were a pro team. They paid their players. And it wasn't until a few years later, in 1879, that they played the first World Series. But it was within the group of teams that they had. They didn't have American or National League yet at that time.
Dave?
Yeah.
I think we should explain that first professional team. Up until that time, were professional teams, but not every player on a team was considered to be a professional. Some teams were made up of paid players and amateur, unpaid players.
Yep.
The Reds were the first team to field
Take on that full
team of
professional.
all paid players.
Yep. And that was the start of what we have today, of course. Like I say, in 1879, the Cubs played in the first World Series, but it wasn't between National and American League because they didn't have those yet. And Albert Spalding, and I'm sure the Spalding name rings a bell with all you people who are sports people, he was involved with that. And about that time, the teams began to use better equipment. Before that time, bare hands. I dislocated this finger real bad one time when the line drive came back, relocated my finger. So you played with bare hands.
And how long ago was that?
That was back in the 1840s and 50s and into the 60s. it went beyond that somewhat, but the rules began to change. Because about this time, new equipment came along. The old gloves were nothing more than just a piece of leather on the palm of your hand, which really didn't do much at all. But eventually, and most of this early stuff, from what I saw in the book, seemed to help the catchers. And the catchers needed help because once they started throwing harder, they were still barehanded. I met one of the old Negro leaguers several years ago. He was a catcher and his fingers were all beat up because he had to play. He said, you broke a finger, you played ball. You didn't play, didn't get paid. So his fingers look like he'd been through the war.
Yogi Berra once reported that, I forget who he said was his best friend, but another catcher. He said he shook hands with him one time, and it took him a half an hour to get their fingers apart.
I know Ira's were all bent up. He played on the Kansas City Monarchs in the Negro Leagues. So they got a little better slowly. Gloves and helmets and all these came along at various time periods. In 1896, the National League formed. That was the first one that formed up. In 1901, the American League formed. So there in 5 years' time, you had what we have today as far as American and National. And in 1904, the first National versus American World Series was played. So it hasn't been too recent, but yet it hasn't been way back either. And then in 1919, and I know some of you remember reading about this, the baseball scandal, where the White Sox threw the World Series to the Reds, and it was found out, Shoeless Joe Jackson, some of you know that name, I'm sure, very good ball player, but he ended up in the middle of this. He was part of the problem, and he and 7 other players got a lifetime ban. So Pete wasn't the only one that got one. Only theirs was for throwing the series. Hard to believe. The commissioner at the time was a man by the name of Kennesaw Mountain Landis, and he gave them all the boot forever. So they never got to play again, at least as professionals. And he comes into play here another way. In 1904, he helped to get blacks so that they could not play in the National League teams, or the big league teams. The vote was 15-1, so everybody else agreed too. And at that time, there wasn't any other choice except they played. They had teams since way back in the 1850s, but they were never considered good enough, especially back in the early years. Some of them were still barely out of slavery. Moses Fleet Walker, a black man, was the first professional baseball player. He played for the Toledo Blue Stockings in the early 1900s. So, 1884, I'm sorry. So, he got in, but he didn't last long. They just didn't want him around, so they just said he couldn't. There was a player by the name, and in the early 1900s, you'd have known this man. Now, we probably haven't heard of it, most of us. His name was Cap Anson, and he was with the Chicago White Sox, and he was a star player. He was quite a good hitter, but he led the teams to keep the ban on blacks. And sometimes he said that if they put so-and-so, or Fleet Walker, if they put him out on the field, they weren't going to play him. And so they pulled him off, and the game went on. So prejudice in baseball has been for a long time. Then in 1920, a man by the name of Rube Foster, a black man, formed a separate Negro National League so that they would have some of the similar chances to play ball as did the white players. And everybody knew that there were players down there that probably could compete with the white players, but it didn't happen for a long time. 1933, the Negro Leagues had an East-West game. that was something like their World Series. And a man by the name of Gus Greenlee was on one, was sort of the commissioner of one, and so they got that off the ground. Then the Depression hit, and that hurt the Negro Leagues badly because they didn't have people that could come and pay and such. And of course, World War II came along, and we know that many baseball players went to the war, both black and white, and served their country. So it kind of messed up baseball for a few years. But then in 1947, and I'm sure most of you know that year and what happened, Jackie Robinson came to play. And the white managers were all complaining because he was there. And Leo DeRocher, who, again, some of you know, he said, guys, he said, you better get ready because there's more of them coming. And he was right. He was quite right. The next year, in 48, my hero, when I was a little kid, Larry Doby, came to play for Cleveland. He was the first American League black man to play. So things got started then. Once that happened, it just didn't take too many years before you had lots of them. 1959, the Red Sox were the last team to sign a black player. His name was Pumpsie Green. In 1960, the Negro Leagues officially ended. And an interesting sidelight here, just not too long ago, the baseball people, whomever they are, decided that the Negro Leagues would become full major league records. And so any records they had from the Negro Leagues now have become a part of the baseball history. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It took them a long time, 60 years, but they managed to get it done. The three sources I got most of my stuff from, there's a book up here called Baseball Before We Know It by David Block, and that's where I got a lot of the old stuff. And it's very complicated. This is a family tree for baseball. Can you find it? It's got more curves than there's baseball. Here and there, and just all sorts of things. But that's the family tree for baseball. I don't know what you'd call it. It's not a tree, that's for sure. But that's what they have. And I think this is one that we got here, just Ron found it. This is downtown Upper Sandusky, the Shannon Brothers. We have baseballs, mitts, masks, and balls. It will meet your fancy. Our prices will surprise you too. I don't know what that meant. And this is just a picture of a baseball game. Looks pretty much like today, but whoops. Ron and I were noticing. There's the outfield fence. Spectators. And they're down here too. So they didn't have fences, they just played. If you hit it into the crowd, you just went after it. Kind of like what we do when we play the old time baseball that we play. So, and another book, or another one I got was from History Channel, had one called The History of Baseball. And that gave me a lot of the modern, from 1800s on up. And then we've been playing baseball, organized historical baseball since 1994. It's the first time I ever played old time baseball, as we call it. And the Ohio Village Muffins was the team. A muffin in old time baseball parlay was a bad player. So if you were on a muffin team, that meant you got to play, but you weren't any good. You got to play another team that was just as bad, so it's even. So the Muffins is what their team is. They still play, but in 1981 they started this vintage baseball. I remember going down and watching a team from Virginia, Monticello, came up and played them at the Ohio Village. And now I'd hate to guess how many teams there are. I'm kind of out of it now, but I would guess that there's probably upwards of 75, 80 teams around the country. We've played teams from a lot of the eastern states, of course. We've traveled to New York, and Indiana, Pennsylvania, Michigan, all around Ohio. And like I was telling somebody before, next year there's a tournament down here in Stepping Stones Park, first weekend of June typically. It's called the Mayor's Cup. And this year we actually got the mayor to come down and throw out a first pitch, and one of the councilmen did the second day. It's a 2-day affair, Saturday and Sunday. And Ken Shanes is one of the guys on the local team. He said he's got a team coming from Florida. They're driving up to play ball. So it's all over. We've seen teams from Colorado. We never played against them, but Colorado and, like I say, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey. A lot of fun. We played in a big tournament up in New York a few years back and came in third. So we had a pretty quality team that time. So I've got a few baseball cards up here. Larry Doby's one of them. Ira McKnight that I talked about, a friend of mine's another one. Jackie Robinson. I forget who else I've got up here. Oh, I've got Happy Chandler, or Gus Greenlee and Rube Foster are there. And Cap Anson is in there. He's the guy that was the bad guy in keeping the Negroes from playing at that time. And I have a book here, this green one, that's pictures of old baseball cards. The first baseball card, I believe, was made in 1853. So they've been around for a long time, just haven't been very popular up until when we were all kids. You know, I'm sure some of you still have your ball card collection somewhere. Or wish you did.
Wish I did, yeah.
You know, that Mickey Mantle rookie that you put on your spokes on your bike. That was what, 20,000, 30,000, something like that. Any other questions?
Everybody here has probably bought Tops.
Oh, yeah.
Bubble gum that came with baseball cards.
No gum anymore.
But I'd like to mention that my paternal grandfather, Fred Eystone, used to chew Red Man tobacco in a small paper pouch that came with baseball cards.
Right, those started back in the late 1800s in force, kind of in force, I guess. So,
Talk about dummy boy.
oh, yeah, one of the cards in there is for a man named Dummy Hoy. He has Upper Sandusky roots, and the reason he's called Dummy is because at a young age, he lost his ability to talk. So they called him Dummy all his life, and that's what he wanted to be called. And just a couple months ago in the giant metropolis of Houghtown, okay, what's that? It's a little tiny crossroads over in Hancock County, and they dedicated a new plaque to him and what he did. But he played Major League Baseball. It's quite a story. He played Major League Baseball, and some baseball historians give him credit for inventing signs, because he couldn't hear when he called balls and strikes. So he'd have to look down at third baseline at his coach to see if it was a ball or a strike. In the meantime, the pitcher threw another one. It was perfectly legal, but they changed that rule, and so he got some signals that he could use. And so that's one of the other cards up there. See if I got anybody else that I forgot about. I can read them from this distance. This one in the lower right-hand corner is a guy that yeah, I got one, a Pumpsy Green, the one that the Red Sox finally chose in '59. But I've got a picture of the first baseball card from the 1850s. So, any other questions?
Do you have any signatures, or how many signatures do you have from ball players?
Most of the ones I've got are none that you'd ever recognize, because when I met Ira, he came down to a Heritage Festival in Tiffin one year. He and 3 of his friends, and they came over to Sycamore and talked to a crowd that evening. And I've met a number of Negro League players. I mean, they were professional. Ira almost got up into the majors, but he broke a finger in his hand, and that took him out. So I've got a number of those, but as far as big league professional ones, I don't think I have any, Dina. Just wrong place, wrong time. Yeah,
Reading a history of Eaton School and my dad's sports exploits out there. He played kitten ball. What was kitten ball?
good question. Well, a lot of games were just inventions. You know how kids are. They invent
Well,
their
I mean,
own
this
games.
was a sport. I mean, it was a league sport.
It was a league?
Yeah.
Oh, I know nothing about that.
You mentioned cat ball. I suppose it was some
Might-
sort of variation.
might have
I
been
always thought it
related.
was like softball versus baseball.
Yeah, might have been. Never heard that term before.
When did Dummy Hoy play and for whom?
He played, let me see if I've got enough information on the back of the card.
He was from Upper then.
He was from Houghton. That's why they put the, I put my glasses back on. Not luck with these. Yeah, he played with some of the major league teams. Okay, here, dummy. And some of you know, oh, I can't think of his name, the Hoy that lives here in Upper, Dan. Yeah,
That's
It's
his
his-
relative?
it's his, like great uncle or cousin or something. Oh, I'm reading the wrong one. I hope I get it right.
Tommy Hoy was inducted into the Hancock County Sports Hall of Fame
Yep,
a year or two ago, maybe last year.
yeah, they kinda,
Cincinnati Reds. So he played for Cincinnati Reds.
there he is.
And 2 Washington DC franchises, 1888 to 1902.
Yep, that's the print's too small for me to read, sorry about that. But he did play for some regular professional teams. And, which to me is quite incredible, just to think of what he couldn't do and yet didn't seem to slow him up a whole lot. That's something
It
for,
turns out that kitten ball is another name, the earlier name, for softball,
okay,
with the origins reaching back to 1887
okay,
in Minneapolis, created by a Minneapolis fireman.
Oh.
And there was a league, the kitten league.
okay. You gotta learn something. I learned something too. So, anybody else have any questions, comments, corrections,
I think we
additions?
should also mention for those who may not have heard that, that guy named Babe Ruth, who set some records, during the era of Herbert Hoover's presidency, in one of those years, that was 29 to 34, during one of those years, it became known that he was being paid, Babe Ruth, $80,000 to play professional baseball for 1 year. And when the local newspaper reporter, probably from the New York Times, said something to him about, do you think you're justified to make $80,000 when the President of the United States doesn't make that kind of money in 1 year? He said, well, I had a better year than
Well, and then now if you compare the highest paid players to the president's got jelly beans.
This is in the news right now. A gentleman named Juan Soto, S-O-T-O, plays for the Washington Nationals, just turned down a contract offer for $447 million.
How many years?
10.
10? Okay,
He obviously, he's young. He's expecting to be offered more.
good luck. You won't get any of my money, I'll tell you that. Anybody else have
He
any
did win the
questions?
home run derby during the,
Yeah, I know. They only get a pittance for doing it.
I want to mention that up at the top of the stairs, we actually have on our sports display, we have some early baseball memorabilia in there, including one of the early baseball gloves that was owned by a Wyandot County resident, Ozzy Osbourne, who, Wilfred Pearl Osborne, who was a professional baseball player here. We have one of his early baseball cards and also a T104 baseball card of Ed Hong. And the 104 series was started by a cigar company. And some of you may know that the most expensive card, Honus Wagner, he was against smoking, so he was appalled when he found that his picture was on a card put out by a cigarette company. He ordered them all destroyed. A few of them slipped through, and those are the ones that command $1, $2, $3 million for a simple baseball card. But we have some examples of some of that and some early baseball memorabilia upstairs. What's exciting is Ed Hahn, who was from Wyandot County, actually was a member of the 1904 Chicago World Series championship team. And it said that he was hit in the face with the baseball, and then he went to the hospital, was treated, came back to play the next day and lead them to the championship. So we've had several players, primarily from Sycamore and Nevada area, that went and played professional ball in the early 1900s, 1910s.
I'm sure glad I had all you people here that know all this stuff, because I learned stuff
Yeah,
tonight.
and
Who
I was
makes
talking-
baseballs now?
What?
Who makes baseballs now?
Oh, golly. That I can't tell you for sure, but I'm sure that,
Last
Yeah.
I heard, manufacturing operation, which is made mostly by hand, was in Haiti. Haiti.
doesn't surprise me. They throw some ball players up our way too.
Right,
Them.
they're mostly made by women who are known as the chickens. Because when they're sewing baseballs, there's a certain motion where your elbow lifts up quickly. And that hence, they appear to have some kind of relationship to chicken.
Okay.
Well, we thank you all for coming here tonight.
I have something to say, yes. When I was growing up, I spent quality time down at the park with my friend Barbie, and I have to say, baseball to me, looking back on it, Phil McGuire. I thought he was, I remember him playing, I remember you playing, and of course you're a bit older than Barbie, and you were wonderful. And so when I think back about watching baseball games when I was younger, I think of Phil.
I was always glad he was on our team.
I'm sure you were.
See.
I'm sure you were.
We had a lot of fun.
Thank you.
I'm done.
Thank you. I hope to see you this weekend up at the Overland Inn for the quilt show, and then back here in 2 weeks for our next presentation by Fred Malone. So feel free to go upstairs and take a look at some of our sports memorabilia,
And so
including the baseball items.
And come up, and don't forget to come up here in front.